Hey,
Sup?
I'm just chilling right now.
Say, nothing much really.
Hardly anything around here right now.
Yeah.
Thomas yawned as he felt the warmth spread through his boiler. He heard the quiet conversation of Percy talking with his driver. Something to do with the post,
Are you sure there isn't anything for me?
Percy asked.
Afraid not. Just some letters from family living on the mainland and other junk mail.
His driver said.
What's got you interested in the post, Percy?
Thomas asked with a yawn.
I know you like that job, but I don't think anyone would be writing to you. You don't even have a post box for Tom Tipper to put any letters in,
He added cheekily. Percy rolled his eyes and scoffed.
I'm looking for letters from my friends on the other railway, Thomas. I worked in many little yards before Sir Topham Hatt bought me and I came to live on Sodor. Our drivers helped to keep us in touch by writing letters. I've gotten a few recently, but none from Ginty and Pug. You remember them, right? They came to help while we went to London to visit.
Thomas did remember them, and he could remember making a fool of himself in front of Ginty as he was showing off. Ginty had laughed at him, but they became friends by the time he and the other visiting engines returned back to their own railways.
I do, and that's strange indeed. You told me you were good friends with them, right?
Very good friends indeed. It's strange I've not gotten any letters from them. My driver has sent 2 letters asking if they are fine and to respond, but I've not heard anything since. I'm worried they might be withdrawn.
Ha!
Thomas scoffed.
As if that could ever happen. Shunters like Ginty and Pug are indispensable. Even if the other railway is pushing for more of those diesels like that one that came to the mainline sheds, we'll always have a place here.
I don't know, Thomas.
Percy said, unsure. Thomas huffed out of the sheds and went to pick up his coaches.
I'm sure they're fine. If I can, I'll go over and see what's keeping letters from them.
He hissed to himself, although he wasn't sure just how he would get the travel to the mainland. His chance came sooner than expected. Thomas was just puffing into Ellsbridge with his afternoon train when the yard foreman walked up.
There is an order for a shipment of stone to be brought down to Barrow and Furnace. Sir Topham Hatt says there are no spare engines other than you, Thomas. Think you can manage?
Thomas fizzed with excitement.
Certainly, I can do that.
Then the job is yours. Daisy will handle your passengers till you get back. It's a long way to get there, so be quick.
And then he walked away.
Now I'll see what's going on with Percy's friends and why they're not responding to his letters,
Thomas said to himself. The sun was getting low in the sky as Thomas rolled over the bridge onto the mainland. The little blue engine was bubbling with excitement. It had been years since he had last been there, and he was eager to see how much had changed. He chuffed past the station over to the goods yard. As he rounded the bend and crossed under the road, Thomas was struck by something. Some coal bunkers laid near the trackside, completely empty. A coal chute nearby was covered in rust, with an old sign hanging from one bolt, out of order. A nearby water column had a similar sign hanging from its release chain.
This is odd. How do you keep a shunting engine fueled without coal?
He thought. As Thomas came into the yard, he was struck by how silent it was. Trucks were all in the sidings, tidily arranged, and yet there was no engines to be seen. No clouds of steam and smoke in the air to give any hint that they were there. The air began to get cooler, and a mist was starting to form.
That's odd. How come I don't hear any whistles? A yard needs a pilot engine to look after it. Where are they?
A yard foreman walked up.
Just leave your train there. We'll get a shunter to move it later,
Came the gruff response. Thomas looked around. He didn't see any other engines apart from himself. Before he could ask, he heard a growl and a roar from behind. Quickly, a big mainland diesel roared by, its dark blue and yellow paint standing out from the long train of dirty trucks. It roared through a warehouse loading platform and disappeared into the encroaching gloom.
But where's the shunter? I haven't seen or heard one since I arrived.
Who's over there?
Thomas looked over to see a faceless diesel rumble past, dragging a train of tankers. It seemed to growl louder as it passed by. As he looked around, he noticed signs. Diesel fuel, diesels park here, don't idle in sidings, and diesel oil were what they said.
Where's Ginty? Or Pug? Don't they work here?
Thomas asked sheepishly.
Don't know no Ginty or Pug. Haven't had a Ginty in this yard for... I don't bloody know. Anyways, you're uncoupled, so why don't you get yourself out of my yard?
Thomas's crew, unnerved by the terse order, quickly opened the blue tank engine's regulator, and they raced away into the distance.
We have to find a turntable or something to turn around. If only this fog wasn't so thick.
He was right. The mist was turning into fog as the temperature dropped. Thomas rattled over the points quickly. His eyes darted around as shapes appeared out of the gloom. Everywhere he saw diesel notices, coal bunkers filled with weeds and marked with masking tape crosses, indicating not to be used. Taking a guess, he followed a set of track curves between some buildings, which gradually became more open as the warehouse got smaller in scale.
This must be the way.
He thought. But it wasn't. Thomas followed the track for a ways, but nothing felt right. The tracks creaked and groaned under his wheels as the weeds brushed his chassis. Now he was certain this was the wrong way and he was lost. But up ahead, he saw a gloomy shape of some steam engines in the dim dusk light.
Driver, look! Steam engines.
Thomas said hopefully.
Maybe they can tell us.
The words died in his mouth as the mist slowly cleared to reveal just where Thomas was. There were steam engines, but they were all covered in rust. They lay in piles near the tracks. Many did not have wheels and were just boilers stacked up haphazardly. The few engines still on the tracks chilled Thomas the most. These engines were not as rusty as the others, and seemed to have most of their parts, but they were silent and dead. Darkened smokebox doors stared out at Thomas, where their faces had once been. All the engines were small tank engines, just like him. Just like. Thomas gasped as he looked in the back and saw a familiar pair of engines. One had 6 small wheels, and the other had 4. Rust almost covered their early BR crests.
I think we should head back.
The driver stammered. Thomas said nothing, but he quickly puffed away the moment his regulator opened. The scrap engines faded away from view, and soon they were lost in darkness and distance. Percy parked his post vans neatly in the sidings and then puffed towards the sheds. As he chuffed over, he noticed one berth's doors were closed up tight. He puffed into his berth and saw Thomas sitting silently.
Thomas?
The blue engine jumped in shock as if he hadn't noticed Percy coming up. He then tried to force a scowl onto his face.
Percy! Don't do that!
He berated, trying to sound cross, though Percy could tell something was on his mind.
Sorry, how did your trip go? I'm certain you enjoyed it since you never get to travel along the main line. I know you love your branch line, but still, it's nice to get out sometimes.
Thomas looked around, as if not sure what to say.
How was the mainland? I'm sure a lot has changed. What station did you drop your train off at?
Barrow and Furnace.
Oh, that's where Ginty and Pug worked. I heard they were moved there following our trip to London. Did you see them there?
Thomas looked away and grimaced. Percy looked at him carefully, and in a moment he understood.
Yes, I saw them.
Thomas said.
They really miss you and said they couldn't write to you because they were so busy. I mean, you know the other railway, always busy and...
They were scrapped, weren't they?
Thomas paused mid-sentence and looked at Percy. The expression on the green saddle tank was blank and firm. It wasn't one of worrying or anything, just acceptance, as if this was something he long suspected.
I'm sorry, Percy. I really am,
said Thomas sadly.
It's not the first time, Thomas. I've gotten letters from friends who've been withdrawn and scrapped. I only wish Ginty and Pug have written a letter to me to say goodbye. Maybe they did, and the letter was lost in the post. I guess I won't know.
Thomas looked at Percy with a sense of wonder. He'd always known that Percy was a cheeky, bouncy, somewhat naive engine. And yet, he was handling the news very well. He could see sadness in his eyes, but also acceptance that Ginty and Pug were no longer around. He wondered for a moment how Percy could be all right with that. Then, as if sensing his question, Percy spoke again.
We are very fortunate to live here with such a kind controller like Sir Tom had, aren't we, Thomas?
Yes, Percy. We are.
It took a while for the engines to move on. Percy recovered in remarkable time. Soon he was cracking jokes with the trucks and being cheeky as always. Thomas took some time. Sometimes, when he was in the shunting yards, he'd stare out along the main line, retracing his way back to those cold sightings in his mind. Eventually, work shoved those thoughts out of his mind, and a smile soon crossed his face once more. But it would be a long time before Thomas would ever dare journey beyond Sodor.
They took away my paint job and my girlfriend. Can't have shit on Camino.
Ready to meet Sharpie? Now this is a knife.
One day, Edward was in the shed where he lived with the other engines. They were all bigger than Edward and boasted about it. "The driver won't choose you again," said Gordon. "He wants strong engines like us." But the driver and fireman felt sorry for Edward. "Would you like to come out today?" "Oh, yes, please," said Edward. So they lit his fire, made lots of steam, and Edward puffed away. The other engines were very cross at being left behind.
Go on, Edward! Go on!
You idiot! What?
Edward worked hard all day. The coaches thought he was very kind, and the driver was very pleased. I'm going out again tomorrow, Edward told the other engines that night. What do you think of that? But he didn't hear what they thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Next morning, Edward woke up to find nothing had changed. Gordon was still boasting. You watch me, little Edward, as I rush through with the express. That will be a splendid sight for you. Goodbye, little Edward. Look out for me this afternoon. Edward went off to do some shunting. Edward liked shunting. It was fun playing with trucks. He would come up quietly and give them a push. Then he would stop and the silly trucks would go bump into each other. Oh, they cried, whatever is happening? Edward played till there were no more trucks. Then he stopped to rest. Presently he heard a whistle. Gordon was very cross. Instead of nice shining coaches, he was pulling a lot of very dirty trucks. A goods train, a goods train, a goods train, he grumbled. The shame of it, the shame of it, oh, the shame of it. Edward laughed and went to find some more trucks. Then there was trouble. Gordon can't get up the hill, the porter called to Edward's driver. Will you take Edward and push him, please? They found Gordon halfway up and very cross. His driver and fireman were talking to him severely. You're not trying. I can't do it, said Gordon. The noisy trucks hold an engine back so. Edward's driver came up. We've come to push. No use at all, said Gordon. You wait and see, replied Edward's driver. They brought the train back to the bottom of the hill. I'm ready, said Edward. No good, grumbled Gordon. They pulled and pushed as hard as they could. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it, puffed Gordon. I will do it. I will do it. I will do it, puffed Edward. Edward pushed and puffed and puffed and pushed as hard as ever he could. And almost before he realized it, Gordon found himself at the top of the hill. I've done it. I've done it. I've done it, he said proudly. He forgot all about Edward and didn't wait to say thank you. Edward was left out of breath and far behind. He ran on to the next station, and there he found that the driver and fireman were very pleased with him. The fireman gave him a nice long drink, and the driver said, I'll get out my paint tomorrow and give you a beautiful coat of blue with red stripes. Then you'll be the smartest engine in the shed. Thomas's branch line is important, and so is Edward's. But their track and bridges are not so strong as those on the main line. The Fat Controller does not allow the heavier mainline engines like Gordon to run on them. But one day, the way Gordon was talking, you would have thought the Fat Controller had given this order for quite another reason. It's not fair, grumbled Gordon. What isn't fair? Asked Edward. Letting branch line diesels pull main line trains. Never mind, Gordon. I'm sure Boko will let you pull his trucks sometime. Gordon spluttered. I won't pull Boko's dirty trucks. I won't run on branch lines. Why not? Would be a nice change. The Fat Controller would never approve, huffed Gordon. Branch lines are vulgar. Gordon puffed away. Edward chuckled and followed him to the station. Every evening, the two engines pull two fast trains from the station. Gordon always leaves first with an express for the main line. Edward follows 5 minutes later with his train for the branch line. Usually everything runs like clockwork, but tonight there was trouble. A lady in a green floppy hat was saying goodbye to a friend. It was nearly time for Gordon to start. The fireman looked back towards the guard's van and saw something green waving. Right away, mate. He thought the guard had waved his flag. Gordon started, leaving luggage, his passengers and the guard all standing on the platform. Everyone was very surprised and cross. To make matters worse, by the time Gordon had been stopped and brought back, Edward was already late with his train. So now he set off first. But the signalman at the junction wasn't told about the change. By mistake, he sent Edward along the main line. Gordon was sent along the branch and arrived cold and cross on one of the sidings near the harbour.
Greetings.
Next morning, Bill and Ben peeped into the yard. There were no trucks for them. They didn't mind that. Teasing Gordon would be much better fun. "What's that?" asked Bill. "Shh," whispered Ben. "It's Gordon." "It looks like Gordon, but it can't be. Gordon never comes on the branch lines. He thinks them vulgar." Gordon pretended he hadn't heard them. "If it isn't Gordon," said Ben, "it's just a pile of old iron, which we'd better take to the scrapyard." "No, Bill, this lot's useless for scrap. We'll take it to the harbour and dump it in the sea." Gordon was alarmed. "I am Gordon. Stop, stop!" When Boko suddenly arrived, Gordon thought him the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. "Boko, my dear engine, save me!" Boko quickly sized up the situation and threatened to take away the trucks he had brought for Bill and Ben. This made the twins behave at once. Gordon thought he was wonderful. "Those little demons, how do you do it?" "Oh, well," said Boko, "it's just a knack." Gordon still believes that Boko saved his life, but we know the twins were only teasing, don't we?
The engines on the Fat Controller's Railway loved Halloween, from the kids who dressed up as witches and goblins, to the pumpkins which sat upon the station. However, what they all enjoyed most were the scary stories they would all tell to each other. And it's said that on the date of the accident, the faceless engine returns to the rails in search of a face that fits just right. "Ooh, ah, spooky," said all the other engines. You're all scared of that measly story. I've heard worse. I wouldn't get too cocky, chimed Duck, or you might get scared by the ghost whistle again. Thomas just looked away in embarrassment. He didn't like being reminded of his incident at the smelters the year prior. Well, does anyone else have a story they'd like to share? There was a long pause until Henry spoke up. I actually have one I'd like to share. Oh, great. Is it a story about the rain, or what about a lumberjack? Thomas said cheekily. Henry just looked down at the ground in deep thought. He then looked at Edward. Do you think they're ready? It's up to you, Henry. Gordon? You're the one telling it. Are you going to tell the story or not? Thomas said impatiently. All right, quiet down, Thomas, and let Henry bloody speak. A long time ago, on a railway far, far away there, was a small fleet of engines. They worked hard to keep the railway afloat. However, the work was getting too much, and the controller knew he needed a new engine. So, he decided to bring 3 on trial. Sadly, these 3 weren't the nicest of engines. They were arrogant and boastful. However, while 2 engines knew when enough was enough, the 3rd one didn't. He had no name, only a number. Some say this was the reason for his temper and arrogance, but nobody truly knows. He would always pick on the smaller engines and take out all his anger and frustrations on them. Looky here, you little runt, Henry said in a raspy voice. If you can't get my coaches to the platform in time, I'll make sure to push you into the sea. And I've noticed those buffers at the harbor are getting a little loose these past couple of days. Once he said this, the tank engine ran off and hid in the shed the rest of the day. The bigger engines, as well as the other trial engines, tried to tell him sense. Stop picking on engines smaller than you, they would always say. But he took no notice. One day, a different tank engine was shunting in the harbor. His crew had left to chat with the signalman, and the little engine sizzled in the sun. Just then, he heard the all too familiar sound of trucks slowly moving along the line, and eventually they began to speed up. The engine was horrified to see a long line of trucks that were rattling towards him. He blew his whistle long and loud, hoping help would come, but it was too late. The trucks crashed into him, sending him flying down the line. He tried to stop, but without a crew, he was powerless. The little engine then crashed through the buffers to the end of the pier, falling into the sea below. They made efforts to try to find the engine, but the cranes weren't long enough to reach the bottom, and the engine was lost forever. The other engines, as well as the controller, chalked it up to an accident. However, one of the big engines had been watching the whole time. Tell me, why were you leaving the harbor in such a hurry? He asked the nameless engine. Well, I was running late, of course. I had a very important passenger train to pull. And you expect me to believe that you, of all engines, would be running late? Tell me, why did you kill that engine? He shouted, alerting the other engine in the station. I knew it was you. It was so bloody obvious,
called the other big engine. Chuckled the nameless engine.
Looks like you caught me. Yeah, I did do it. I honestly thought it was that other tank engine.
So because he was late bringing your coaches to the platform, you thought a suitable punishment was death.
If an engine can't do their job well and on time, then they aren't useful. They're just a waste of space. You disgust me.
The nameless engine just laughed.
If you dare tell anyone, I'll make sure you suffer a similar fate.
The two big engines just sat flabbergasted by what they had just heard. However, this didn't stop them from telling the controller what they were told. The controller, however, didn't believe them. There just wasn't enough evidence to prove their claims. What they didn't know was that someone had overheard everything they had just said.
I cannot believe you didn't believe us,
called one of the big engines. Well, can you blame them? We literally had no proof to support our claims.
I guess you're right.
Just then, they heard the sound of the nameless engine's whistle, blaring in the distance. They were horrified to see the nameless engine pushing a long line of tankers right towards them. They whistled and screamed for everyone to evacuate the station. They closed their eyes, awaiting their fiery end. But the signalman managed to switch the points just in time, and the nameless engine was sent onto the far line into the yard. A massive explosion echoed out from the yard. The two big engines were horrified by what had just happened, and soon the oldest engine on the line raced into the station, asking what had happened. The two big engines explained everything, and that's when they realized the original tank engine, which gave the nameless engine so much trouble, was stationed in the yard. They ran in to find the yard had been engulfed by a massive inferno, and within were the burned and rusted remains of the tank engine and the nameless engine. Once the fire was put out, the tank engine was raced to the works. The workmen tried to save him, but they were too late. He was too far gone. The nameless engine, shockingly, managed to survive in the end.
Sir, you must believe me,
he cried.
I was only shunting them when they got away from me. I was only trying to stop them, sir.
I am tired of your excuses, Henry said, mimicking the controller.
Too many things have happened since I brought you here, and I cannot take it anymore. Once you are repaired, you are to take a passenger train up the line. Then you are to leave my railway. What?
Cried the nameless engine.
You can't do this to me. I've put countless days into this useless railway to improve it. I've had enough of your excuses.
The controller then turned to one of his big engines.
Please take this engine to the works. I cannot look at him any longer.
It isn't clear what exactly happened next, but what can be said is that the passenger train the nameless engine would take would end in disaster. It was a dark and misty night when the nameless engine backed onto his train. The two big engines sat in the yard, glad to know they would. Soon enough, the guard blew his whistle, and the nameless engine set off for its ill-fated journey.
What happened next? Stammered Percy. Henry just looked down at the ground.
It isn't 100% sure what happened after that. They only ever got one man's testimony. However, the authenticity of it isn't clear.
Well, what did he say? Thomas asked, trying to seem brave.
The man said that as they traveled down the line, the mist had grown worse, and by the time it cleared, they realized too late they had been sent off the main line and onto an old branch line.
Bloody hell, we're on the branch line!
Called the driver. Up ahead, the line curved around a cliff face, and the line of which had been blocked by a landslide. The driver went to apply the brakes, but nothing happened. The nameless engine began to laugh. He then crashed into the rocks, plummeting down the cliff, cursing out the controller as he fell. And it said, on the date of that accident, he runs again, whistling and laughing as he plunges into the gap.
Henry then let out a long whistle. The other engine jumped as Edward, Henry, and Gordon just laughed.
Oh, once scatty engines, always scatty engines,
remarked Henry cheekily.
Well, I never knew you could tell such a story, Henry.
That story wasn't real, right, Henry? Murmured Percy.
Oh, of course not. I only made it up on the spot to give you lot a good fright.
Percy just let out a sigh of relief and went to sleep with some of the other engines.
What's up, Brandon?
You did good, Henry.
Hello. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
I just... Don't you think we should tell him?
Tell who? The three engines jumped, shocked to see Thomas still wide awake and listening. Well, go on. Spit it out. Henry looked at Edward. I think it's time we tell him, Edward said glumly. Alright, you three are really starting to creep me out.
Thomas, do you remember when I told Percy that story was made up?
Yeah, it was only 10 minutes ago.
Well, you see, I sorta, lied.
Thomas was taken aback by this. So you're telling me an engine really did kill his passengers? Henry, how the hell did you hear about this?
Thomas, that wasn't the only part I lied about. I also lied about its location, too. It didn't take place at some old, faraway railway. It happened here.
Thomas looked at the ground, shocked by what he had just heard. But soon, he began to laugh. Oh, Henry, if this is your way of getting back at me, you have to try harder than that. Thomas! Shouted Edward. Does the number 98462 mean anything to you? Thomas thought for some time before he finally spoke up. I think an engine held that number. But there was no engine here that had that number, at least from what I can recall.
Bloody hell, he isn't getting it.
Getting what? All you three have been doing is asking me a bunch of pointless questions.
Thomas,
Edward said sadly.
that tank engine that was killed in the explosion, that was you.
What?
You were the first engine purchased to help build the railway. We managed to get you the works in time, and by the time they had finished, James had already been purchased, and you lost all of your memories.
Haven't you ever thought about why you look nothing like your brothers and sisters? Or why you have no memories of your life before Sodor?
Thomas sat in silence as the realization truly sank in.
So, those weren't dreams after all.
What dreams?
Edward said comfortingly. I've been having these dreams of other engines I've never seen before. Tell me, does the name Alberts mean anything to you? Edward then looked to the ground, holding back the tears.
That's a name I haven't heard in a long time. That was a tank engine 98462 pushed into the sea.
All the engines went silent. Do you really think 98462 killed them on purpose? Or were they really accidents? The engines just stared silently at the sky, thinking about the story of the nameless engine.
Oh, bother. Now what do we do?
Don't worry, old boy. We're not that far from Wellsworth. I'll walk back down the line and call for help. I'll be back soon.
All right, driver. Oh no, an engine's coming. If I don't try and warn them, there could be what the? Stay away from me. No, no, please, don't hurt me.
What on Sodor are you on about?
Oh, it was just me. Sorry, Henry. It's nothing.
Yeah, are you okay?
I'm fine, Edward. I just broke down at Henry's forest. Luckily, Henry came along and saved me and the passengers.
Glad he did. The passengers wouldn't be happy if they were left there for even longer.
But Bear, why did you yell for me to leave you alone when I buffered up to you? You looked like you saw a ghost.
Might I ask, Henry? Why do you all like diesels so much? They're too quiet for their own good.
Watch what you say, Emily, or else she will come for you.
What do you mean, Edward?
Well, I'll tell you. It was many years ago, back when the Northwestern Railway was first opened. There used to be an engine who worked at Cosby. She was a kind and humble engine, but she rarely said a word to any engine or person who talked with her. Many of us didn't bother her about it, but two old engines who work on the railway always picked on her for this. They didn't have a name, only numbers. One was numbered 98462, and the other was numbered 87546.
Still not going to say anything, Miss Mute. You're such a pathetic engine to be on this railway.
Stop picking on her 87546. If she doesn't want to speak, she doesn't have to.
Oh, come now, Henry. You must see this little tank engine as a disgrace to the railway.
That's enough, 98462. She is a kind and humble engine to us all, and you and 87546 have no right to treat her like this. Me and Henry always defended her, and always argued with 98462 and 87546 for how they treated her. But no matter what we did, it didn't stop until one night. Eight 7546 had to take the goods train to take us down. As they passed through the forest, which became Henry's forest, one of the couplings snapped on his train, causing the last few trucks to fall loose. 87546 felt this change, but didn't tell his crew about it, leaving the trucks in the line behind him. Back down the line, the tank engine was pulling a small freight train of supplies to help build the Brendan branch, which was under construction at the time. It was very dark, so by the time she saw the trucks on the line, it was too late. Her crew applied her brakes, but the train pushed her further and...
Uh-oh.
They found the crashed train the next day. The brake van had been crushed, but luckily no one was in it. But the engine. The smoke box door was gone. They tried to search for it, but after no success, they scrapped what was left of the engine. The night she was scrapped, me and Henry were furious at 87546 for what he did.
How could you be so careless, 87546?
Oh, pipe down, Henry. It's not like you would care.
Not like we care? What do you mean? Of course we care.
You certainly didn't care when Alfred died.
98462 tried to kill me and Gordon. Not to mention he killed Albert and possibly Thomas.
His name was Alfred.
Karma always comes back for you, 87546. Just you wait. Little did we know, 87546 was about to pay for what he did. A lot sooner than we thought. Around a week later, 87546 had to take a late-night passenger train, known now as the Midnight Express, from Vickerstown to Denver. Everything was going well, but after he passed Wellsworth, and I was resting at the time, he broke down in the middle of Henry's forest.
Oh, great. How can a grand engine like me break down like this?
Oh, calm it down. The guard can head back down the line to get help from Wellsworth. You should be back soon.
Just great. Getting help from that old iron.
The guard came back to Wellsworth, and I was steamed up to go help 87546, with the guard riding with me and my crew. But when we arrived, we found that 87546 was gone. Thankfully, all of his passengers were okay. They were asleep. I pulled the heavy train to Knapford, where the patroller was waiting, as well as some police officers. They took the passengers' statements as I went back to my shed, and from what I learned later, they all said that they remember the guard leaving to get help, but after that, they only remember waking up on the way to Knapford. The next day, a cleaner at Cosby found 87546's crew asleep on the bench on the platform. When asked how they got there, they had no memory of what happened. All they knew was one moment, they were waiting for the guard to get help that night, and the next they were waking up on the platform. The police investigated any leads, but they only found one person who had an answer for them, and that was Crosby's station master, Jackson Bailey. From his testimony, he was in his office, waiting for 87546 to arrive, when he claims to have seen the faceless engine puff through the station towards Henry's forest. To this day, it is believed the faceless engine haunts the railway in search of its lost face. You saw her, didn't you?
What was that? Who's there? Hello?
Okay.
You don't deserve my heart.
Who are you?
You are lazy. You don't deserve work. You don't deserve what? Price.
What? No. No, say that. Help, someone please help me. Please.
Between Crosby and Wellsworth, which connects the rails over the river. It was considered by many train spotters as the perfect train spotting location, with its breathtaking views either snowing, spring, or even at night. Historians or railway fans can tell you about its history, like the time Gordon lost his dome on the viaduct, the 1985 repair that almost brought the entire railway to a standstill. However, there's one story that's so unknown and so disturbing that 1 in 20 engines or people knew about it and wouldn't dare to share it. This is the story of the ghost train of the Gap. In 1900, the railway was booming in Sodor. The Victorian era, or the 19th century, may be coming to an end, but it's the beginning of a new century, the 20th century. However, there was one problem. The NWR wasn't actually existing on Sodor yet, but consisted of 3 railways. The S&M, or the Sodor and Mainland Railway, W&S, or the Wellsworth and Sudbury Railway, and the TK&E, or the Timoth, Knapford and Elsbridge Railway. Between them was a river which split the TK&E from the other 2. It was known as the Gap by some people since it split the railway from being one. Around 1910, 3 railway companies decided to come together into a single railway, which will be known as the NWR. Soon the 3-year work on the viaduct began, once the trackers had been laid down toward the cliffs. However, there was another problem. All of the engines were busy with their jobs like pulling passengers, goods, or assisting with other projects on the line. So instead, the company hired a tank engine from the GWR to assist the workings of the viaduct. However, it had no original tank engine. The engine was an 1895 prototype of the GWR Holden 101 tank engine, which can be familiar with the Hornby train set. The difference is it had a large boiler to hold more water compared to the newer models and an enclosed cab. Despite this, the engine was proven to be hard-working and progress was going well for the viaduct, until one night on 29th of June, 1913. On that night, a night shift foreman was watching over workmen near the entrance to the viaduct when he noticed something. There seemed to be steam in the distance and puffing sounds. He pulled out his binoculars and looked through them. What he saw was the engine puffing towards the viaduct, and he was carrying some coaches. At first he was confused. What's he doing? Until he noticed something else. The engine was going faster and faster without stopping. Fearing the inedible, he blew his whistle and cried, "Runaway train!" alerting the other workers on both sides of the viaduct. Many of them ran away from the bridge as they jumped off the tracks, stood back and watched. The engine came roaring past, screaming with his whistle blowing and ear-piercing sounds, so loud that some of the workers even lost their hearing. The coaches that the tank engine were pulling looked like they were filled with passengers. He blew his whistle and cried, "Runaway train!" alerting the other workers on both sides of the viaduct. Many of them ran away from the bridge as they jumped off the tracks, stood back and watched. The engine came roaring past, screaming with his whistle blowing and ear-piercing sounds, so loud that some of the workers even lost their hearing. The coaches that the tank engine were pulling looked like they were filled with passengers. The engine crashed into the work barriers and fell down into the river below. There was a loud crash before a mighty explosion could be heard as the boiler exploded. The workers ran down the embankment to the crash site to check for any survivors in case of some miracle. But what they saw was shocking. It could only be seen as a picture of hell. The carriages were burning due to the explosion. Bodies of the victims laid around the scene, some even decapitated due to the huge force they must have experienced during the crash. The engine remained in pieces due to the blast. Almost nothing was along with its crew. Once the deaths were counted, 56 people had died, including the crew of the tank engine. It was considered by some to be the most deadliest and worst train wreck in UK history, if not the entire world. Not even other train accidents from past and features such as the Harrow and Wealdstone, Quintonshire, or even the Armagh in 1899 could possibly beat it for not only the deadliest of crashes and the amount of lives lost, but also the mystery and conspiracy that would follow. And the original engine that was meant to take them to Wellsworth had broken down, and since the tank engine was the only engine available, he took it, and due to being 15 minutes late when it departed, it was traveling faster to make up for lost time. Investigators also interviewed the designers of the prototype engine, who mentioned that the engine had a huge problem where rarely its brakes failed due to its design being too heavy, which is why it wasn't adopted, and after the recent ordeal, the Holden 101 tank engines were scaled down compared to the tank engine. The reason why it was given to the NWR during the construction was, as long as the engine was traveling at a slower pace either around the worksite or pulling a slow goods train, it was considered worthy enough to help with construction. Soon the official inquiry concluded that the failure of the accident was due to the design of the engine's braking power, plus the unfortunate timing of being in the wrong place at the wrong time for pulling the train when the original engine failed. Despite this, many workers refused to believe this, because whenever something was not right before an accident, it can lead to a decades-old mystery. Soon, many workers were saying that the engine was insane, which is why he never talked, and it unfortunately was given a train of passengers, which gave them an excuse to travel faster like an express. Others say that the accident was a suicide made to look like an accident. However, the most common theory is that the engine was possessed by the devil himself. It could explain why he was acting very strange and antisocial lately, but there were some more pointers during the accident. The first thing is while the workers were running away, they could hear the engine screaming like a lost soul, like a demon. Some workers who stayed back and witnessed the accident reported the engine had fiery red eyes and devil teeth. At first, the theorists took no notice due to the other workers thinking that the comrades must have been delusioned or traumatized by the accident. However, the theory quickly escalated when the foreman who spotted the engine had suffered a horrifying death. While he was walking to a station at Wellsworth on his way home, he slipped and accidentally fell into the path of a moving train, killing him within seconds. Many workers tell everyone that it wasn't an accident but a suicide. They say that while he was looking through his binoculars, he spotted the engine's fiery demon red eyes, and he committed suicide as he couldn't get enough of it, or worse, possessed to do so. Whenever it was by accident, insanity, suicide, or possessed, or something unexplainable, it was still a mystery. After the accident, the three companies had run out of money due to paying the families or loved ones of the victims, replacing or repairing the work equipment in the bottom of the viaduct for damage due to the explosion. Luckily, one of the chairmen was friends with the First Lord of the Admiralty, none other than Winston Churchill, who saw the island as an outpost in the direction of Ireland and gave the NWR enough money to not just finish the railway, but to get the viaduct finished by 1914. Unfortunately, despite how deadly the crash was, it was overshadowed by the outbreak of the Second Balkan War in 1913, and thus was forgotten about it. The Rev W. Audrey was planning to tell the story in the beginning of the Ghost Train story and tramway engines, but it was cut due to fears that he could give the readers nightmares. Although there's a TV show covering it during the 70s, it only aired once due to how disturbing it was with only one reviewer, whose review was in the Sodor Sun's newspapers quoted, "As shocking but great as a campfire horror story. Might tell it to my engine over on the NWR." However, a creepypasta appeared around 2015 that tells the story of the engine called Timothy, who crashed in revenge for his controller while possessed by demons to kill his younger brother Thomas. While the story helped the accident gain a bit of attention, it was however not true, because in the story, the engine was an E2 prototype, not a GWR Holden. He was scrapped when all of the E2 kind were scrapped, and he was also a father figure to Thomas. Even to an extent that when Thomas was told of the story, he was raging mad and swore that he wanted to kill the author of the story for insulting his brother. But back to the story, many historians, however, don't think the accident actually happened. There are no photos of the engine itself, nor the accident areas besides a painting of it, or even legalized death certificates of the victims. However, there is one piece of evidence that was a manifest on the train the engine pulled at the time. It was the same original engine and passenger numbers. There was a rumor from the inquiry notes of the accident, but it was lost forever. But it's once said that every year on the day of the accident, it runs again as a warning to others, punching into the gap, screaming like a lost soul.
And every year on the date of the accident, it runs again, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul.
On the Skarloey Railway, just before it leaves Lakeside, the line passes a manor house that has fallen into disrepair. It was called Montague House, after a wealthy family who once lived there. No one quite knew what to do with it. Some argued it should be restored and made into a tourist attraction. Some wanted it to be demolished completely. However, those who knew of its history argued that it should be left alone, and so the Sodor Trust, a trust dedicated to keeping alive many elements of Sudrian history, claimed it as theirs and forbade anyone to change it. Most of the little engines remained silent, as did the coaches whenever they passed the house. They were well aware of its dark past, and couldn't bear the thought of the old house, the final mark of respect to those who perished being demolished. The exception to this was Duncan. He grumbled on and on about why the house was still standing in the first place. "It's just a colossal waste of space," he complained one morning in the shed while he was being prepared for work. "Why would anyone want to keep a crumbling old ruin if they're not even going to use it?" Peter, Sam, and Skarloey groaned and looked at each other. By the way Duncan usually complained, he made Edwin Richards look like the world's most patient engine, but this time Duncan had gone too far. However, Skarloey knew Duncan had acted in this manner before, and when Peter Sam opened his mouth to protest, he wisely told him, "Not a word, Peter Sam. We'll never get him to listen when he's like this. He won't understand until he's seen it." Ivo Hugh is the youngest of the Skarloey engines, but even so, he is still prone to mechanical faults. These are mostly due to his bouncy nature, and that he is still young and full of his own grandeur and self-importance. He had been praised recently by the tool controller for his hard work bringing goods down from the quarry to be loaded onto boats at Lakeside. Not for the first time, this had gone into his funnel. "I am hard-working," he thought, "and if I keep this up, I shall be the hardest-working engine on this railway." Harder and harder, he puffed through the night with his final train of the day, the trucks rattling and screeching behind him. "Steady on, boy!" exclaimed his driver as he fought for control. "We're not running a race or anything." "Of course I know that," complained Ivo Hugh. "I just—" But he never finished his sentence. A loud burst of steam erupted from him and he slowed to a stop. "Whatever happened?" exclaimed Ivo Hugh. "I feel so weak." His driver jumped down and inspected his engine. "Oh, history just has to repeat itself," he muttered before explaining. "You burst your safety valve. You can't pull the train anymore." Ivo Hugh groaned. Oh dear. The others will say I'm as bad as Gordon now. His driver looked still more disappointed. His fireman spoke up. Come on, Dan. Let's get help from up the line. The driver looked uncertainly at him. We don't have a choice, whispered the fireman to him. So they damped down his fire, told the guard, who placed detonators on the track to protect his train and took shelter in his van, and they ran up the line as fast as their legs could carry them. Ivo Hugh was all alone. But not for long. After his driver and fireman disappeared in the distance, he felt a distinct chill in the air. He shuddered and looked around him. Then he saw a figure standing by a nearby lake, staring up at the manor. It was a young man. Excuse me, asked Ivo Hugh. Is there something the matter? The man just carried on staring. Ivo Hugh blinked, certain he could hear him from that far off. Then he gasped. The man had disappeared. Wondering if he was seeing things, he blinked again. There was the man again. This time standing right in front of the house. Ivo Hugh screamed and closed his eyes tight. He didn't open them until Rusty came to rescue him. The little diesel took one look at Ivo Hugh and sighed mournfully. The poor young engine. Such a terrible thing to see. Such a terrible thing to happen to both of them, he murmured, before taking Ivo Hugh back to the last station, where Sir Handel, grumbling about having to work late until he told him what had happened to Ivo Hugh, was waiting to take the young engine home, while he took the trucks to Lakeside. The next day, Ivo Hugh was shunted into the workshops, still quivering from his ordeal. Rheneas saw this, and after glancing sadly at Skarloey, sidled into the works alongside. I know you've had a trying night, Ivo Hugh, he said, and I think you'll understand when I tell you this. Because of Ivo Hugh's breakdown, Duncan was put in charge of his trains. What does the toll controller mean, putting me on Ivo Hugh's goods? That we youngsters just a coward. I fancy being afraid of something we pass in the daytime. Duke glared crossly at him, but wisely said nothing. He had seen engines like Duncan before, and knew how it would all end. For the rest of the day, Duncan rushed along the line, trying to do Ivo Hugh's work as well as his own. The problem was that because of his rushing, he often went over the line's speed limits, despite his crew's efforts to keep him under control. Goods were damaged, passengers were bumped and slightly injured, and everyone said what a bad railway it was. But the worst was yet to come. Duncan had one last job to do before he set off home. This was to take the last load of freight from the yard to Lakeside. By this point, he was desperate for his work to be done soon, and he trucked the trucks as he arranged them. Get to line, you horrible lot, he grumbled. Oh, groaned the trucks. Just wait, we'll pay you back. They had heard about Duncan's rough treatment all day, and were determined to pay him out. They followed quietly when Duncan left the yard and took them up the line towards Lakeside, racing through the dark of the night. Just in front of where Ivo Hugh wrote down was a curve leading into Lakeside. It wasn't the sharpest curve on the line, but it was a serious cause for concern for fast trains. Duncan knew this and tried to slow down, but the trucks had other ideas. On, they cried, and crashing their bumpers pushed Duncan, who had already applied his brakes but was still going fast, down the line towards the curve. Oi! Shouted Duncan. Stop that! But his demands fell on deaf ears, and he pushed back against the train with all his might. But it was no good. As they rounded a bend, the train tilted and swerved so violently that 3 trucks behind him lurched and derailed, bringing the whole train to a standstill. Yah, stupid trucks. Now we'll be late, and the toll controller will blame me, grumbled Duncan. If you think that's bad enough, started the fireman, but the driver hushed him. It's that time of night. He'll get his punishment soon enough. Why? Asked the fireman. You know where we've stopped, replied the driver. After damping Duncan's fire down, they jumped down and joined the guard, who was as white as a sheet and hurriedly placing detonators along the line. You all right, Rod? Asked the driver. Just go get help so we can get the train out of this shoddy place, exclaimed the guard. The driver and fireman ran up the line as fast as they could, leaving Duncan on his own. Ah, well, he thought, I'll just go to sleep. But he never did. Suddenly, he felt a feeling of coldness and the sense that he was no longer alone. He looked around and saw a beautiful woman standing at one of the windows of the manor. Duncan was astounded. He had believed that the house was abandoned. Indeed, it looked so, with its smashed windows and web-covered doors. He blinked, just to be sure he wasn't seeing things. The woman was nowhere to be seen. He blinked again to be sure, then almost had a boiler explosion when he saw the woman was now standing on the roof. What's happening? He cried. The trucks had seen everything, and they were frightened too. Ghost! Save panics. Ivo Hugh's ghost! Cried Duncan, who then screamed long and loud into the night. It was morning by the time Fred arrived with the breakdown gang. The tall controller oversaw the operation. He took one look at Duncan's sleep-deprived and pale face. Perhaps that'll teach you not to rush your work, he scolded, with a touch of sympathy in his voice. Then he left aboard Fred, who cleared away the trucks so Skarloey could take Duncan back to the sheds. Skarloey could see the state Duncan was in. There is a reason as to why we keep the house still standing, Duncan, he explained. It stands as a mark of respect because of something terrible that happened before I arrived on Sodor. You noticed, I take it, the state the manor is in, covered in cobwebs, and half of its windows broken. Did you ever see the figure of a woman standing out from the topmost window and then up on the roof? Duncan remained silent, which told Skarloey the affirmative. The old engine continued. Have you noticed the figure of a man standing by the lakeside when she is gone? Have you heard of a love affair that took place that was never meant to be? That is the life of Lady Jane Montague. Once, her family was the most wealthiest in the land. Her mother, the daughter of a factory owner from Yorkshire. Her father, son of a duke of ancestral heritage. Lady Jane was arranged to marry another man of a similar age. This was the Right Honourable Sir Frederick Woodhouse, son of the Earl of Sussex. But she fell in love with a man below her station, the stable hand, Peter Marlowe. Many a night after she had attended Sir Frederick's countless dinners and visits, she would sneak out of her house, where she and Peter would meet by the lakeside and embrace, their bodies intertwining, their eyes glassy and full of affection. They would only separate when they heard the owls cry before dawn, promising each other that they would meet the next night. It was most unfortunate for them that on one such night the gamekeeper should take a stroll, having failed to sleep. The gamekeeper never made his presence known, but reported his sightings to Lady Jane's father. Enraged, the father locked her away in her room and claimed to all that she had passed away, even forbidding her from any food and water. At the same time, some 2 days later, by way of coming across the gamekeeper drunk, Sir Frederick learned of Lady Jane's betrayal. He went to the stable, enraged with Peter for apparently stealing from him. Peter was shocked and distraught to hear that his beloved Jane was dead. The two men fought, both strangling each other, Blood flew from both of them as they, being evenly matched in strength, sought to fight each other to the death. Finally, Peter arose and grabbed a knife he always kept for his food, leaving Sir Frederick's lifeless form. He charged through the house, murdering everyone and destroying everything in his way, in his anger at being told what he hoped to be an untruth. He entered the drawing room where Lord and Lady Montague were announcing their loss to some close friends and killed them without hesitation. Blood spurted all along the walls. A fire started. Any servant who was lucky enough to escape Peter's rampage was burned to death in the inferno that followed. The cries for help that would never come echoed all around the building. The fire smashed the windows and followed Peter as he raced up the stairs to Lady Jane's room. He then forced open the door where she had been imprisoned and was shocked and heartbroken to find that she had indeed suffered without food and water. Her body was dressed in a white nightgown, revealing her shoulders and arms spread lifeless about the bed. Her face, still beautiful, was in an expression of calmness, but the torture she had endured was visible from the gashes of blood upon her back, soaking into her dress, and from her pale complexion and dried-up body. The sight was nothing but torture to Peter, who openly cursed himself, fate, and the world they lived in, and stabbed himself. It was the only true way they could ever be together. However, even this was never meant to be. The figure by the lake seldom ever appears at the same time as the woman of the house. Their looks are often longing, searching for something they can never see. They keep vigilance on a regular basis, but neither are fated ever to be together again. Duncan was touched by the story, and tears rolled down his cheeks as he was hauled home to be shunted into the workshops. The tall controller gave both Ivo Hugh and Duncan a few days out of work to recover from their ordeal. Both remained shaken up for a long time afterwards, and never talked about what they saw. Duncan kept going with his trains at a much steadier pace for a month afterwards. To this day, he dreads the memory of that terrible night, and from that day to this, he has remained respectfully silent when passing Montague House. Peter and Lady Jane are still there to this day, a reminder to all that love is something which lasts beyond the grave, and that the destruction of something so beautiful such as it is never to be scorned by anyone. They carry on looking for one another, in hopes of finding each other as their hearts desire. Despite what Skarloey said, Duncan and all the other engines hope they will one day reunite. But I think Skarloey is right in saying that that can never be. Don't you?
And every year on the date of the accident, it runs again as a warning to others, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul. Percy, what are you talking about? The ghost train. Driver saw it last night. Where? Asked Thomas and Toby. He didn't say. Oh, it makes my wheels wobble to think of it. Huh, said Thomas. You're just a silly little engine. I'm not scared. Thomas didn't believe in your ghost, said Percy next morning. His driver laughed. Neither do I. It was a pretend ghost on television. Percy was disappointed. That evening, he came back from the harbour. Percy knew where he was, even in the dark. Crow's Farm Crossing. We shan't be long now. He liked running at night. The rails hummed and the signal lights shone green. But a broken cartload of lime lay ahead. Sam the farmer had just gone for help. Percy broke the car to smithereens. Lime flew everywhere. He puffed quickly to the nearest signal box. Percy's driver explained what had happened. "I'll see to it," said the signalman, "but you'd better clean Percy, or people will think he's a ghost." Percy chuckled. "Do let's pretend I'm a ghost and scare Thomas. That'll teach him to say I'm a silly little engine." Toby promised to help. Thomas was being oiled up for his evening train. "Percy's had an accident," cried Toby. "Poor engine," said Thomas. "Botheration! That means I'll be late. They've cleared the line for you, but there's something worse. Out with it, Toby. I can't wait all evening. I've just seen something," said Toby. "It looked like Percy's ghost. It said it was coming here to warn us." "Huh! Who cares? Don't be frightened, Toby. I'll take care of you." Pee, pee, pip, 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 pee. "Let me in! Let me in!" wailed Percy. "No, no, not by the smoke of my chimney, chim. I'll chuff and I'll puff and I'll break your door in." "Oh dear," exclaimed Thomas. "It's getting late. Oh, I'd no idea. Oh, I must find Annie and Clarabelle." It was morning when Thomas returned. "Where have you been?" asked Toby. "Ah, well," said Thomas. "I knew you'd be sad about Percy, and I didn't like to intrude. I slept in the goods shed, and..." "Oh, sorry, can't stop. Got to see a coach about to train." Percy was none the worse for his adventure and was still enjoying himself enormously. He had heard everything. Well, well, well. What do you know about that? Anyone would think, chuckled Toby, that our Thomas had just seen a ghost. We had just steamed up Thomas and we were leaving the work shed. We stopped at a signal, and while waiting we saw Rennies, who was filling up on water. He was talking to Thomas about how his firemen had been acting weird recently and that the new water they had received felt strange. We shrugged it off. I mean, what else could we do? Everyone has those days where they're a little off. Rennies then made a joke saying how he hoped he didn't get any little fish in his tanks. I wished he hadn't, as Thomas was put in a sore mood and we'd have to deal with it all bloody day. We had picked up Annie and Clarabelle and were waiting for Bertie and Ellsbury, but he never arrived. We got a call from his driver saying how they had gotten into an accident, but before he could continue, the call ended. I thought I heard weird moans and what I thought were screams in the background. I was worried, but he did say that there was an accident, so I thought they got into a accident. I just hoped they were all right. We were waiting for the rest of our passengers to board, and something caught my eye. The distance was a large group of people. This group was fucking huge, I tell you. However, something was off. They were all making strange sounds and noises. A workman went to see what the problem was, but once he got close, he screamed in fear and began to run. However, those things got him first and pulled him into the horde and deboarded. That was when they began to pick up the pace and began to run. Passengers boarded faster than I've ever seen before. The remaining workmen banged on the doors begging to be let inside when those things made it to the platform and attacked them. It was an awful sight. I threw on the throttle and with a jerk we raced down the branch line. Thomas had never moved so fast in his life, nor had he ever been so scared. While we were running, we saw Daisy in the fields. She looked confused and scared as we entered the tunnel around it, but then we heard the screams of the banging of metal, and later found out she didn't make it cover. Those things didn't stop us, and we kept running. I kept yelling at Ted to keep shoveling coals. We needed as much steam as possible, and he kept yelling at me to keep Thomas steady. It was a massive clusterfuck, but we eventually made it elsewhere. We backed into the goods shed and I was sweeting my ass off. No one knew what the hell was going on and Thomas was scared beyond belief. He was panicking, saying how we had to keep going to get as far away as possible. That wasn't going to be possible though. We were low on coal, thankfully. There was a Knapford Harbour Company truck filled with coal, so that solved one of our problems. It took a while as we had to refill his bunker by hand, but as long as we had coal and water, we'd be fine. While we were refilling Thomas with coal, a whistle showed from the nearby Henry's tunnel and Emily rushed past the two coaches. The first two we saw were filled with scared and worried people, while the third was a different story. It shook and rattled. I thought I heard muffled screams from within, but I couldn't tell as blood coated the windows from within. After about an hour, we finished refilling Thomas on coal and we found a few buckets of water and threw them in his tanks just to be safe. The last thing we want is his boiler to go. We eventually got to Tidmouth Yard to find the entire station was silent. It seems the station had been evacuated. It does explain about the loose luggage everywhere on the platform. As we searched the yard, we were shocked and glad to find an out-of-breath James and a petrified Duck. We weren't able to get much from Duck. All he said before freezing up was that he was near Colin. I think he mentioned something about the twins. James said he was at Knapford with a small passenger train when everything all broke loose there. He was waiting for some of his passengers to board. While he was waiting, he thought he heard some weird moans from one of the opposite platform. Before he spoke up, one of those creatures attacked one of the passengers and sent the whole station into a panic.
Oh no! I knew this would happen! I foresaw this!
James didn't realize that he wasn't coupled up to his coaches, and by the time he realized this, when he was pulling out, there was no going back to retrieve them to save the remaining passengers.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
He was nearly running for his life as he ran fast as he can to get away from those creatures. He eventually made it to Tidmouth. Realizing that he was nearly out of water, Duck eventually arrived a few minutes later. I asked James where his crew Jason and Phil were. He said they were in one of the buildings searching for supplies, and as they got back, they were going to refill his water tank. So I was thinking, why the hell wouldn't they refill his tanks first? But I couldn't dwell on it. Those things returned, and they were running toward us. James, with all of his might, blew his whistle and alerted his crew. They sprinted from one of the buildings with those things hot on their tail. One of those things slashed Jason's back, but he surprisingly kept going till they hopped into James' cab full of pathetic. The noise alerted more of them. They began steaming him up, and James' face grew red. James looked at Duck and yelled at him to help, but he was still frozen in fear. He quickly began to rev us back. As we were reversing, James began leaking steam and his boiler began to dengine on itself, which means that was an ingredient for disaster. James shut his eyes one last time and yelled for help, but he was cut off by his boiler exploding. Killing him and his crew instantly. Boiler tubes went everywhere, and one almost killed me and Thomas as it went through one of Thomas' cab windows. We have noticed Duck racing back down the line in James' blood. We continued away from Tidmouth, and Thomas hasn't said a word since James blew up. God, James, poor James. He was annoying sometimes and got everyone's nerves with his constant talk of his paint, but he didn't deserve something like that. He truly deserved better. We all do. We arrived at Tidmouth Sheds and were shocked to see Henry, a bunch of survivors sitting in one of the berths. We were so glad to see he had survived. He was even glad to have someone to talk to. Henry said that he picked up a goods train from Brendan and was passing through Wellsworth when he saw people at the platform being attacked by those creatures. Henry raced as fast as he could to get to Frost, where he picked up several survivors and continued down the line till he reached Tidmouth Sheds. Henry did mention he saw Emily and James rush past earlier, and even saw people being attacked in Emily's third coach. While James looked exhausted, he hoped they were okay. Thomas then told him about James and how he was dead. Henry broke down in tears when he told this and got angry at Thomas, saying that he could have done something, but I yelled at him, telling that we would have died if we went to save him. Henry shut up after this and didn't speak another word to anyone that night. We decided it was best to get some sleep ourselves. We hoped Henry would be better by morning.
We've been sitting in the Stack Wellsworth for a few hours now, and we haven't seen much. But you volunteered to head out and figure out what was going on to see if it was safe. Hopefully, he'll be back with you soon. Butcher has been gone for about 3 hours, and we haven't heard anything from him. Edward is starting to get worried, and we've reassured him that he'll be fine, I hope.
Okay, how do I begin? I had decided to buy myself this journal a long while ago to pretty much write down my thoughts. My name is Michael Weckler, and I am an engine driver on the Northwestern Railway. I work alongside my fireman Ted, and we both drive the railway's number 3, also known as Henry. I'm pretty sure you all know about him at this point, whether it would be his tunnel, his new shape, the flying kipper, or, of course, our favorite spot when we have no work to do or just want to relax, Henry's Forest. You're probably concerned about the whole Rule 55 thing that Wilbert Audrey complained about, but as it turns out, we do always whistle off the signal to let him know we're coming to stop at the siding. Very nice man he is. We always leave Henry to go up to the signal box and have a friendly chat with him about our day, how our families were going, like if we were old mates who usually spent time at the pub. And during all that, we would look out of the window and see our engine admiring the beautiful scenery or watch the workmen doing their work. And sometimes when he sees another engine coming through the main line, he would call out a greeting to them. There really was something about that forest that the big green engine loves about the island. we could all agree that it really was peaceful, as well as hope that nothing will change, especially the time when a huge storm damaged the forest and everyone came to build it up again, leaving Henry very grateful for the help of Toby, Trevor, and Terence. He does do work around here, of course, but like I said, we usually stop on a siding whenever we just want some time out of work, and it is certainly a blessing indeed. Today was Wednesday 11th, and we had done a lot of our jobs here and there for the rest of the afternoon. After a morning break around the forest, I'm currently riding down around the sheds at Tidmouth on our lunch break, and what can I really say? Henry is doing fine and his fire is burning nicely. He's also looking over at the sunset, waiting and ready to pull the flying kipper for tonight. We went along though, as Henry was having a friendly chat with Donald while we spoke with his crew. Nothing much to write here, really. We're getting ready to pull the kipper now, but as we were preparing to leave the turntable, we noticed that when Douglas backed next to Donald, he remained silent and kept staring down at his buffers. His twin asked him what was wrong, and he said that during one of his passenger runs, he could have sworn he saw a man wearing a hockey mask in the far distance around Henry's forest, staring at him. Henry and Donald assured him that it was just his imagination and told him that it was probably some kind of tourist wandering around the forest. This seemed to have calmed him down a bit, and after pulling the regulator, Henry set off towards the harbor. We are coasting down the line with the kipper now, and I even got a chance to look around the forest. We didn't see any man wearing a hockey mask though, so I'm sure that whatever Douglas saw, it was playing around in his smoke box. I'll probably stop writing for now, just so we can finish the job and head back home to our beds. I could see that Ted was getting tired too, and I don't blame him. Anyway, I'll be writing down in this journal again in case things get interesting. Shit, I knew Douglas wasn't seeing things. I just hope we find him soon. It's now Friday the 13th, which I suppose is because a thick fog is looming around the island, making our journeys very difficult, but we push on as always. I didn't manage to write down much for the entire day, due to how much we had to deal with, although the whole day was pretty much uneventful, so I have nothing much to say. However, as soon as we finished delivering our last goods trains across for the evening and made our way to Henry's forest, that's when our night became horrible. We whistled to the signalman again. We switched points for us as always, although he didn't say anything to any of us, so we just stopped Henry by the siding. To make things even weirder, we saw only one workman around the forest as we were making our way to the signal box to check with the signalman. We asked him where the other workmen are, but he only told us that we shouldn't be here and that we needed to get the hell out of there. Confused, we just let him stay around Henry for a bit while we went into the signal box. We didn't chat for very long, as we suddenly heard some kind of voice coming through the trees. The signalman went pale immediately after hearing that, and we quickly decided to let him come with us back to our engine. As we were climbing into Henry's cab, we saw the workman trying to talk to. No, it can't be. It was a man wearing a hockey mask that Douglas described, but he was clearly holding some bloody machete. We called out for him to stay away from that thing, but it was no use as he was stabbed by the hockey masked man, and we decided to make a run for it backwards. Didn't stop until we reached El's Bridge and got ourselves together on the platform. wondering what the hell just happened. Henry is freaking out more than us, but I don't blame him. The signalman stayed to calm him down, while me and Ted walked over to the station to get some food. As I was getting ourselves some pastries, he showed me a newspaper that a very infamous serial killer named Jason Voorhees had came back from his burial spot in Camp Crystal Lake and ended up in a ship to Sodor, killing many passengers on board. While it was understandable, it didn't make any sense at the same time, but after we finished getting filled up with decent food, we went back into the engine and continued to drive down the line in reverse, slowly and carefully this time, while whispering goodbye to the signalman as we left him on the platform. Oh God, I pray that he'll be okay. We haven't gone very far when we were past the timber yard, when Henry suddenly stopped in shock. We leaned out. We were also surprised to see who it was. Right next to us, with 4 flatbeds and a brake van, stood a very shaken Donald. Henry asked if he was all right, and he said that he, along with his crew, were fine. They just couldn't believe what they had to witness earlier today. We then told him to explain everything, and so he did. It was the middle of the day when it all happened. Donald was just waiting for workmen to load up his flappers with logs when they all heard a voice around the area, and before he and his crew knew it, the man wearing a hockey mask had begun to kill the workmen around him. Not knowing what to do, Donald started to run away while the fire began to pour and out the workmen, even though some of them would already be dead. Just like us, Donald and his crew stopped around Ellsworth just so they could catch the freight in the yards, and while they were there, Douglas stopped by and wondered what was wrong. He told him that he was right about the man and that he had to witness the workmen being killed around Henry's force. Douglas was sorry for his twin as they both continued their work, with Donald reaching the timber yards and unloaded the logs, though he couldn't shake off the feeling of what just happened, and neither could his crew. We asked what happened afterwards, and he said that he simply stayed there and listened to the news through a radio about Jason, and many engines had passed by. For example, James rumbling by with a slow goods train as usual, as well as Duck pulling a local passenger train. With so much that has happened to us in one night, we had agreed to go straight to the sheds to clear our heads, or in Henry and Donald's case, clear their smoke box. During the journey, Henry told Donald his side of the story, and he was glad that we had survived. We were also sorry for the workmen that were killed around Donald, and told him as well that there wasn't anything he could have done. Once we had backed our engines into the shed, we found Edward, Percy, Toby, and to our relief, Douglas in the shed. While Douglas was comforting his twin, Edward wondered if we were all right, to which Henry explained that they had encounters with this Jason character. He then sighed and began to tell everyone about what he was told about him. Apparently, people from far away had said that Jason had died when he was just a small boy and was buried, but as it turns out, he seems to keep coming back from the dead to get his revenge. Some people have had their own encounters with him and had survived. Some tried to even stop him, but they just couldn't. All of us had pretty much remained silent, as the old engine had finished, saying that if we ever see him, we should be careful. Eventually, all the engines had fallen asleep, except Henry and I have been having to write all of this down while Henry was still awake, and just like what Donald said, I'm just glad we're all still alive. I think I'm going to stop writing for now. I can see that Henry is finally drifting off to sleep. I just hope someone will catch that Jason bastard. I wish I could say things got better for us, but as soon as we reached Kildin, that's when shit hit the fan. We switched to the sidings around the station and stopped there because we saw Rebecca, Gordon, and Percy. They looked like they were talking about what happened to them, and Percy looked tired, which, as it turns out, he had to shove Gordon's coaches out of the way and put them at the platform. Henry, too, was wondering what happened to the 2 big engines, so they began to tell us. It was around the same time we were pulling our local passenger train, and Rebecca was just at Kirk roaming with her own local, which I guess explains why we didn't see her and had to push her whole train there, because the nearest turntable to her was under repairs. She didn't mind though, because she was just happy to be useful. But out of nowhere, after the voice of Jason showed around the station, he began to kill some of the nearest staff and passengers on the platform, causing everyone to go into panic. Rebecca ran back to the station, but had forgotten to couple back up to the coach. She wanted to stop and go back for them, but when Jason saw her, she knew she had to leave the poor coaches and passengers behind.
Hey, what's up?
When she reached the junction, she rushed to the other track towards Kilburn, but as soon as she passed the difficult bend, she hopped a piston around Ballagron and came to a stop. That was when she saw Gordon approach her to the same line and slammed on the brakes just in time. At first, Gordon was cross and asked Rebecca why she was in the middle of the mainland, but as soon as he saw Jason behind her, who was slowly approaching them, he quickly bucked up to her, and they both went straight to Kilburn in reverse. They didn't go very fast though, since Gordon still had his express, but it was fast enough for them to get away from Jason. Once they were there, Gordon told the station master to get an engine to put his coaches on the platform for another engine to take over the express for him while he looked after Rebecca, to which he agreed and sent for Percy. Salty then asked Rebecca where her crew was, and she said that they were talking to the station master about trying to figure out who will take the express instead to Vickerstown. Before Henry could even offer to help, we all heard a bunch of screaming from the town under the station and saw Jason kill a whole bunch of people. Then he suddenly looked up at us and slowly started to make his way towards the station.
Gmod.
Rebecca blew her whistle loud and long to alert his crew, but that was a big mistake for her, because when she broke her piston, water had been leaking out of her. Her crew arrived as fast as they could and jumped into the cab, but we soon realized that Rebecca's face was turning as red as Jane's paintwork and her boiler was now completely dry. Her crew were trying desperately hard to cool her off, while Percy was begging us to save her, and Gordon yelled at him to not approach her. And then it happened. It all happened so fast that my hand is shaking as I'm writing this down. When it all became too much for her, Rebecca shut her eyes and screamed so loud until her boiler exploded. Like, oh my fucking god. First of all, boiler tubes went everywhere. Some of them flew by Gordon and nearly killed him, since they were just so close to his face and cab window. Henry and Salty were alright. We managed to back them away from Rebecca before she went off, and Percy, oh god, Percy. A lot of her blood had splattered all over the right side of him, and his face was filled with pure horror, mixed with the blood, which didn't help. And as for Rebecca's crew, they were already killed from the explosion, so they didn't even stand a chance. Even though Jason finally got to the platform through the silence around the area, Percy ran off screaming while we took Gordon and got the fuck out of there. The poor engine was devastated, and so was Henry. There just wasn't any time to mourn for our friend. Everything was just happening so fast that we didn't even get the chance to say goodbye to Rebecca. We can all hear Gordon crying, but we all needed to get to Maron as fast as possible.
voices whisper the cry for the Delta line. There's a reason why. You tried before, but you can't buy it new. No matter what you do. The darker side of the night, fires like a fire for the wasted life. And there's no way you can fight to show some respect and try to survive on the darker neon shadows that point the way never lead you out. It's a game they play. The madness comes and the madness goes. It's a simple world, but it's all they know. You tried to fix it, but there's nothing you can do. You just gotta see it through. The darker side of the night, burns like a fire for the wasted life.
God damn.
To show some respect and try to survive on the darker side. In this city, you give and they take. You reach the limit, you bet, and then you break. And there's no escape. There's no escape now.
I wonder if someone wrote an AU about Freddy Krueger. That'd be pretty interesting.
One early morning, Gordon awoke with a start. He felt strange, but he could not explain why. His driver, who had come to clean him before he began, reassured him. "It's just ditch water," he said to Gordon. "It can get into your mechanical workings and make you feel sick." Gordon was satisfied with that explanation, but what was odd was that he couldn't remember falling into the ditch, even though it had recently happened. The memory was fuzzy at best. "I'm just exhausted from pulling the express as well," he chuckled to himself and fell back into an uneasy sleep. He dreamt of vague images, those of a mine and of darkness below. In these images, he felt a part of him, as if viewing the events from above. He couldn't see anything clearly, but he felt strongly that memories didn't belong to him. Later that morning, Gordon sleepily brought his train to the junction. Thomas, who looked equally tired, greeted him with a smile. "Long night?" Thomas asked.
Yes. I had some weird, strange dreams,
Gordon replied. "Me too. It was like we were back at the old mine again. But when I awoke, I couldn't actually remember being there at all." Gordon's eyes widened.
I had the same dreams. Come to think of it, I can't remember falling into the ditch, much less rescuing you from the mine.
"What does that mean?" Thomas asked.
I don't know. We only just came back. I remember bringing you to the yards just before the Queen came to the island.
I remember that too. But why can't we remember actually being at the mine? The two engines decided to find out themselves. That night, the two of them puffed up to the line, which led from the big station. They rounded the bend that led to the mines. But they were met with cautionary signs which read, "Danger, collapsed mine ahead." "We'll investigate it from here," said their crew. They walked past the signs and towards the collapsed mine shafts. They came back a short while later. "What are you doing back so soon?" Thomas asked. Nothing to see. Let's head back." Thomas and Gordon didn't believe him. "You didn't even take a light with you. How could you have seen anything?" The crews insisted, but Thomas resisted. He sped through the cautionary signs and stopped at the edge of a large gaping pit. When he looked down inside, he shrieked. "Gordon!" Thomas cried, tears welling in his eyes. In the pit were two mangled engines. One looked exactly like Gordon, and the other like Thomas.
Who are these engines?
Gordon asked. A terrible feeling began stewing deep in his boiler.
"I can explain,"
a familiar voice said. It was the fat controller who stood next to his car with a light in his hand.
"I had hoped this day would never come, but alas, here we are. There were you,"
he continued sullenly. What do you mean, were? Asked Thomas, distressed in his voice. When you fell into the mine, Shamish, you didn't just fall. The mine collapsed beneath you, swallowing you whole. We tried bringing Gordon, our strongest engine, to lift you with the pulley system. But we misjudged how hollow the shaft was below, and he too fell into the growing chasm beneath the ground.
But how could we be here if we're down there? Gordon asked.
It's a gruesome tale, said the Fat Controller. We had a major scandal due to a lack of judgment and saved face. We saved your faces. There was a challenged engineer from crew who had moved your identities into your new shells.
Plot
The
twist.
engines you see below were your former selves. You were prototypes. Thomas and Gordon didn't know what to say. In their confusion, they began to cry. That doesn't change who you are now, the Fat Controller said. You two are still of my most useful engines. We had given you a second chance. And we're avoided a scandal. We understand, Thomas said in a derisive tone. Soon after, the two engines slunk home, buffer to buffer. Everything felt familiar and foreign at the same time. They didn't feel whole anymore, knowing that a part of them was rotting away in the bowls of the mine below. They had only hoped that one day, many years from now, these memories would become fuzzy too.
Oh, I love this video.
It was a cool autumn evening on the island of Sodor. The engines had been working hard all day and were looking forward to a good night's rest at the sheds. Everyone that was, except James.
How long am I going to be kept waiting? At this rate, the sun will be down by the time we reach Edward's station.
Don't worry, James. I'm sure we'll be back home in no time at all. Just have a little patience.
Oh, I hope so. I hear there's going to be fog this evening. I shouldn't like to get lost in it, that's for sure.
Unfortunately for James, the fog came down thick as he made his way down the line. It was so thick that James's lamp had a hard time shining through it.
Stupid fog. Driver, I can't see a thing.
Neither can I, but we'll have to carry on.
Because the fog was so thick, neither James nor his crew realized that an old set of points had redirected them onto an old line that ran deep into the woods.
Oh, bother. What stupid thing points are? I don't even recognize this line.
Calm down, James. We'll just go back and let the signalman know about the points.
Good. Honestly, why doesn't the fat controller just get rid of these disused? Disused.
James, is everything all right? What kind of sick man would scrap an engine like that?
No idea.
I don't want to find out. Get me out of here!
At the sheds, all the other engines were settling in for the night. Except Thomas, who was worried about James.
Where's James? He's usually here by now.
I wouldn't worry too much about it, Thomas. He must have been held up by a signal. I'm sure he'll be here in no time at all. Ah, speak of the devil.
There you are, James. We were just talking about you. How was your day?
James, are you all right? James said nothing as he backed down into his berth. He was unusually quiet and looked very pale.
If I didn't know better, which is quite rare, I'd say that poor little James has seen a ghost.
Well, I did see something.
What is it? Oh, the scary Jack Frost come back to pay you a visit?
I saw a scrap engine.
That's it? I understand it is rather distressing to see those poor souls, but you've seen them hundreds of times, James, and never once have you looked this disturbed.
This one was different.
How so, James?
Well, it was cut in half, clean through the middle without a fault at all. Its other half wasn't anywhere to be found. It wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before.
All the other engines were very disturbed by what James had said. Even Gordon, who was now regretting teasing James.
James, you must have seen a victim of the half engine.
Are you serious right now, Thomas? I am in no mood for your teasing tonight.
I'm not teasing. I know why that engine is like that.
Go on then, Thomas. Tell us.
Well, many years ago, before the Fat Controller's Railway was the Fat Controller's Railway, there were several engines that were brought in to help run and maintain the railway. I was one of these engines, along with several others. However, there was one that was different. Something horrible went wrong during her construction, for she only had half of a face, the other half being her smokebox door. We could hardly understand what she was trying to say. Maintenance on her was a nightmare to watch or listen to, and through all of this, she was in immense, excruciating pain. Her cries and pleas for the pain to go away were so horrid that me and the other engines could hardly stomach it. But the nastiest of us, and even some of the crews, found it a great joke. This would all boil up inside of her, and one day she changed for the worst. She became much more aggressive, snapping at anyone who she came across, even to those who felt pity for her. And to make things worse, at night she travelled out of the sheds and down a heavily forested line. And when she returned, she would do nothing but talk about how we and the whole railway would perish in her garbled, barely identifiable speech. Some of us, myself included, believed she had been driven mad by all the pain she was enduring, seeking any way to be rid of her deformity. Eventually, the Fat Director had had enough. He ordered another engine to take her away to be cut up for scrap. At that same time, me and another engine were heading back home. As we made our way down the line, we could see smoke and the sounds of multiple fire engines. We rushed to see what had happened. And it's a sight I'll never forget. We never saw her again after that day. But we heard rumours from the workmen about noises in the forest on foggy nights. They all told us the same thing. It sounded like someone screaming in pain. And now, it seems her spirit is still around.
What rubbish! Do you all truly believe in little Thomas's story? James, what you saw may not have been as strange as you think. The fog could have simply been playing tricks on you.
Gordon, I'm serious. The half engine is all too real.
Of course she is, just like every other tall tale we've heard here before. Honestly, when will you grow up and stop telling such ridiculous stories?
And with that, Gordon backed down into his berth and went to sleep. The other engines followed suit, but some found it hard to sleep that night in fear that the half engine was around. The next night, Gordon was returning home with some empty cages after his last train of the day. Once again, the fog came down, much thicker than the night before. But Gordon pressed on, and although he didn't believe in the half engine, Thomas's story still ran through his mind.
Thomas was right. What if there really is a... Oh, stop! Get a hold of yourself, Gordon. That Thomas was just playing a trick. He's always been that way.
Just then, he saw a red signal up ahead. Gordon slowly came to a stop. He was very confused, as were his crew.
That's odd. No other trains should be passing through at this time.
Do you think something's wrong?
I think so. Grab some flashlights. I'll go and get the guard.
Soon, Gordon's crew, along with the guard, were ready to go find out what the problem was. Gordon's driver spoke to him.
We'll be gone for a little bit, Gordon. We're heading up to the nearest signal box to see what's wrong.
You can't be serious! You expect me to sit here in the fog in the middle of the main line until you get back?
Yes, that's what we'd expect you to do.
Sorry, Gordon, but there could be danger ahead, and we wouldn't want you getting into an accident. We've left behind some red oil lamps, so you won't have to worry about anyone crashing into you. We'll try to be as quick as we can, okay?
All right, but be quick about it. I just don't want to be left out in the cold any longer than I have to.
As time passed, Gordon began to feel more and more uneasy. The fog gave everything a creepy look, and it didn't help that Thomas's story had crept back into his mind.
All right, Gordon, take it easy. Your crew will be back soon. You'll be on your way again, and before you know it, you'll be back in your nice, warm... Ah! Stupid bird, go away! You're losing it, Gordon. The fog and that stupid story are just getting to your smoke box. There's no such thing as the half engine. There's no such thing as the half engine. There's no such... Hello? Whoever that is, this isn't funny. Knock it off!
Gordon? Gordon? Gordon! Are you alright? What happened?
Half engine! Thomas was right!
Now, how on earth did this happen?
Gordon, can you tell us? What's this about a half engine?
It's nothing. Nothing at all.
All right, if you say so. We'll leave the coaches behind and phone for help at the next signal box.
Gordon soon returned to the sheds, still shaken over what he had seen. He said nothing as he backed down into his berth. But Thomas could tell that something was wrong.
You saw her, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
I did warn you, Gordon. I guess you can consider yourself lucky tonight. No one ever comes back from an encounter with her.
Gordon stayed up for a while that night. He was still deeply disturbed over what he had seen. If there was one thing he could be thankful for, however, it would be that the half-engine didn't claim him as her newest victim.
Today I will tell you a story that you all might know. However, this would not be the version you already know. This is what actually happened. Our story goes back to 1914 during World War I. The Northwestern Railway was forming back then. During this time, the famous viaduct was being built. The controller of the railway was named Peter Harper, but most people know him as the old controller. The railway was run by a few. One of them was named Timothy. From what we've been told about, he was a prototype of the X-Class. Painted grey and had the number 0 on his side. He makes shunts with coaches and trucks like the normal engines. However, one day, his life soon changed upside down.
Good morning, number 0.
Good morning, sir. And my name is Timothy.
Yeah, whatever. I came here to say that the railway is having some changes like construction in Knapford and new engines coming here.
So this means I will go to another place like another railway or something?
Do you really think that I will send you to another railway? What I'm going to do with you is that I will sold you to the scrapyard tomorrow.
What? But sir, I can't be sold for scrap. I'm still really useful. Can you just send me to another railway or another line to work there?
Sorry, but I already made the decision. Besides, I don't care about you in this railway, so there. You will take your last passenger train tonight, and I will be there on board. Good day, number 0.
I can't believe it. I'm going to be scrapped. What have I even done to deserve this? What the? Hey, where am I? What is this place? Oh my gosh, that's me. I need to get out of here.
Hey Timothy, you finally woke up.
Neil, since when are you here?
I just came here to the shack 5 minutes ago while you were sleeping. Also, is it true that the old controller is gonna scrap you?
Yes. How did you know?
Well, while I was working in the yard I saw him telling to someone that he was gonna sold you for scrap, and I can't believe that it's true. So sad that we can't do anything. At least you had a good life.
What? What the fuck is wrong with you? He doesn't care about us and the railway. He only cares about himself.
Look, every engine's time comes, and it's your time now, unfortunately. I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do.
You know what? Fuck you, you stupid bitch. Now, if you excuse me, I have a train to pull tonight.
What is wrong with Timothy? I never saw him acting like that before.
Full steam ahead, Timothy.
Sure thing, driver.
What I'm going to do with you is that I will sold you to the scrapyard tomorrow.
Alright, Timothy, we're going to our first stop. Let's pull the brakes.
I'm sorry, the brakes aren't working.
Wait, what?
I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do. Why did number 0 pass the station? What's going on?
Stop, Timothy. You passed the station. What way? We're on the branch line. Timothy, stop. You will kill us. Someone stop me, please. That's it. Let's jump on.
After that night, the space was cleared and the construction on the viaduct continued. And every year, on the date of the accident, it runs again as a warning to others, plunging into the gap, shrieking like a lost soul.
Thomas yawned as he felt the warmth spread through his boiler. He heard the quiet conversation of Percy talking with his driver, something to do with the post.
Are you sure there isn't anything for me?
Percy asked.
Afraid not. Just some letters from family living on the mainland and other junk mail.
His driver said.
What's got you interested in the post, Percy?
Thomas asked with a yawn.
I know you like that job, but I don't think anyone would be writing to you. You don't even have a post box for Tom Tipper to put any letters in.
He added cheekily. Percy rolled his eyes and scoffed.
I'm looking for letters from my friends on the other railway, Thomas. I worked in many little yards before Sir Topham Hatt bought me and I came to live on Sodor. Our drivers helped to keep us in touch by writing letters. I've gotten a few recently, but none from Ginty and Pug. You remember them, right? They came to help while we went to London to visit.
Thomas did remember them, and he could remember making a fool of himself in front of Ginty as he was showing off. Ginty had laughed at him, but they became friends by the time he and the other visiting engines returned back to their own railways.
I do, and that's strange indeed. You told me you were good friends with them, right?
Very good friends indeed. It's strange I've not gotten any letters from them. My driver has sent 2 letters asking if they are fine and to respond, but I've not heard anything since. I'm worried they might be withdrawn.
Pah!
Thomas scoffed.
As if that could ever happen. Shunters like Ginty and Pug are indispensable. Even if the other railway is pushing for more of those diesels like that one that came to the mainline sheds, we'll always have a place here.
I don't know, Thomas,
Percy said, unsure. Thomas huffed out of the sheds and went to pick up his coaches.
I'm sure they're fine. If I can, I'll go over and see what's keeping letters from them.
He hissed to himself, although he wasn't sure just how he would get the travel to the mainland. His chance came sooner than expected. Thomas was just puffing into Ellsbridge with his afternoon train when the yard foreman walked up.
There is an order for a shipment of stone to be brought down to Barrow and Furnace. Sir Topham Hatt says there are no spare engines other than you, Thomas. Think you can manage?
Thomas fizzed with excitement.
Certainly, I can do that.
Then the job is yours. Daisy will handle your passengers till you get back. It's a long way to get there, so be quick.
And then he walked away.
Now I'll see what's going on with Percy's friends and why they're not responding to his letters,
Thomas said to himself. The sun was getting low in the sky as Thomas rolled over the bridge onto the mainland. The little blue engine was bubbling with excitement. It had been years since he had last been there, and he was eager to see how much had changed. He chuffed past the station over to the goods yard. As he rounded the bend and crossed under the road, Thomas was struck by something. Some coal bunkers laid near the trackside, completely empty. A coal chute nearby was covered in rust with an old sign hanging from one bolt, out of order. A nearby water column had a similar sign hanging from its release chain.
This is odd. How do you keep a shunting engine fueled without coal?
He thought. As Thomas came into the yard, he was struck by how silent it was. Trucks were all in the sidings, tidily arranged, and yet there was no engines to be seen. No clouds of steam and smoke in the air to give any hint that they were there. The air began to get cooler, and a mist was starting to form.
That's odd. How come I don't hear any whistles? A yard needs a pilot engine to look after it. Where are they?
A yard foreman walked up.
Just leave your train there. We'll get a shunter to move it later,
came the gruff response. Thomas looked around. He didn't see any other engines apart from himself. Before he could ask, he heard a growl and a roar from behind. Quickly, a big mainland diesel roared by, its dark blue and yellow paint standing out from the long train of dirty trucks. It roared through a warehouse loading platform and disappeared into the encroaching gloom.
But where's the shunter? I haven't seen or heard one since I arrived.
Who's over there?
Thomas looked over to see a faceless diesel rumble past, dragging a train of tankers. It seemed to growl louder as it passed by. As he looked around, he noticed signs. Diesel fuel, diesels park here, don't idle in sidings, and diesel oil were what they said.
Where's Ginty or Pug? Don't they work here?
Thomas asked sheepishly.
Don't know no Ginty or Pug. Haven't had a Ginty in this yard for... I don't bloody know. Anyways, you're uncoupled, so why don't you get yourself out of my yard?
Thomas's crew, unnerved by the terse order, quickly opened the blue tank engine's regulator, and they raced away into the distance.
We have to find a turntable or something to turn around. If only this fog wasn't so thick.
Just
He was
another
right.
boring day.
The mist was turning into fog as the temperature dropped. Thomas rattled over the points quickly. His eyes darted around as shapes appeared out of the gloom. Everywhere he saw diesel notices, coal bunkers filled with weeds and marked with masking tape crosses, indicating not to be used. Taking a guess, he followed a set of track curves between some buildings, which gradually became more open as the warehouse got smaller in scale.
This must be the way,
he thought. But it wasn't. Thomas followed the track for a ways, but nothing felt right. The tracks creaked and groaned under his wheels as the weeds brushed his chassis. Now he was certain this was the wrong way and he was lost. But up ahead, he saw a gloomy shape of some steam engines in the dim dusk light.
Driver, look, steam engines,
Thomas said hopefully.
Maybe they can tell us.
The words died in his mouth as the mist slowly cleared to reveal just where Thomas was. There were steam engines, but they were all covered in rust. They lay in piles near the tracks. Many did not have wheels and were just boilers stacked up haphazardly. The few engines still on the tracks chilled Thomas the most. These engines were not as rusty as the others, and seemed to have most of their parts, but they were silent. Silent. and dead. Darkened smokebox doors stared out at Thomas, where their faces had once been. All the engines were small tank engines, just like him. Just like. Thomas gasped as he looked in the back and saw a familiar pair of engines. One had 6 small wheels, and the other had 4. Rust almost covered their early BR crests.
I think we should head back.
The driver stammered. Thomas said nothing, but he quickly puffed away the moment his regulator opened. The scrap engines faded away from view, and soon they were lost in darkness and distance. Percy parked his post vans neatly in the sidings and then puffed towards the sheds. As he chuffed over, he noticed one berth's doors were closed up tight. He puffed into his berth and saw Thomas sitting silently.
Thomas?
The blue engine jumped in shock as if he hadn't noticed Percy coming up. He then tried to force a scowl onto his face.
Percy! Don't do that!
He berated, trying to sound cross, though Percy could tell something was on his mind.
Sorry, how did your trip go? I'm certain you enjoyed it since you never get to travel along the main line. I know you love your branch line, but still, it's nice to get out sometimes.
Thomas looked around, as if not sure what to say.
How was the mainland? I'm sure a lot has changed. What station did you drop your train off at?
Barrow and Furnace.
Oh, that's where Ginty and Pug worked. I heard they were moved there following our trip to London. Did you see them there?
Thomas looked away and grimaced. Percy looked at him carefully, and in a moment he understood.
Yes, I saw them.
Thomas said.
They really miss you and said they couldn't write to you because they were so busy. I mean, you know the other railway, always busy and...
They were scrapped, weren't they?
Thomas paused mid-sentence and looked at Percy. The expression on the green saddle tank was blank and firm. It wasn't one of worrying or anything, just acceptance, as if this was something he'd long suspected.
I'm sorry, Percy. I really am,
said Thomas sadly.
It's not the first time, Thomas. I've gotten letters from friends who've been withdrawn and scrapped. I only wish Ginty and Pug have written a letter to me to say goodbye. Maybe they did, and the letter was lost in the post. I guess I won't know.
Thomas looked at Percy with a sense of wonder. He'd always known that Percy was a cheeky, bouncy, somewhat naive engine. And yet, he was handling the news very well. He could see sadness in his eyes, but also acceptance that Ginty and Pug were no longer around. He wondered for a moment how Percy could be all right with that. Then, as if sensing his question, Percy spoke again.
We are very fortunate to live here with such a kind controller like Sir Tom had, aren't we, Thomas?
Yes, Percy. We are.
It took a while for the engines to move on. Percy recovered in remarkable time. Soon he was cracking jokes with the trucks and being cheeky as always. Thomas took some time. Sometimes, when he was in the shunting yards, he'd stare out along the main line, retracing his way back to those cold sidings in his mind. Eventually, work shoved those thoughts out of his mind, and a smile soon crossed his face once more. But it would be a long time before Thomas would ever dare journey beyond Sodor.
Sorry I haven't talked much. Just
Yeah,
work it.
me either.
Nothing much has been going on lately. I was talking to your demon DM in the private chat.
Yeah.
Anyway, JT, how was your day?
Yeah, it's been fine. I'm a bit bored and nothing much, really.
Yes. Yeah, my day has not been nothing much lately. Today mostly I've been working on my 10K subscriber special video, and once I get off the stream, I'm going to continue working on it.
Alright. Anyways, I'm gonna end the stream anyway. I'll see you around.
Alright, JT. See you real soon.
Yeah, see you around.
Bye.
Bye.